If this story has gripped your soul, if it has burrowed its way into the deepest recesses of your mind as it has mine, if it has forced you to question everything you thought you understood about love, about the sanctity of marriage, and about the chilling capacity for murder that lurks beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives, then you need to do three crucial things right now. First, hit that subscribe button for True Crime Files 247. We don't just recount what happened. We dig deeper than the sensational headlines, delve into the darker, more unsettling truths beyond the superficial news reports, and relentlessly pursue the raw, unfiltered truth with an unwavering commitment that no one else dares to match. We meticulously explore the intricate psychology behind the crime, the fragmented humanity lurking beneath the bold-faced headlines, and the agonizing, often subtle choices that transform seemingly ordinary individuals into cold, calculating killers. Second, check the description below for our companion book, The Psychology of a Killer Spouse. Because after Lena's harrowing story, you will undoubtedly crave a profound understanding of how someone can share your bed for 15 years, share your most intimate moments, and yet still be capable of meticulously planning your demise. You will want to recognize the subtle warning signs, the insidious red flags, the chilling moments when love, once pure, curdles into something far darker, something truly sinister. Third, and this is perhaps the most important action you can take, share this story. Share it with someone who desperately needs to hear it. Perhaps someone who is currently feeling trapped in the suffocating confines of their own life. Maybe someone who is ensnared in a relationship that is slowly, insidiously suffocating them, draining their spirit. Or, chillingly, someone who, in their profound desperation, believes that murder is the only viable escape route. Because here is the unvarnished truth. We are all capable of terrible, unspeakable things when we feel desperate enough. The fundamental difference between Lena Miller and the rest of us isn't that she felt trapped. It's that she, in her ultimate desperation, chose murder as her brutal, irreversible escape route. Drop a comment below and tell us, would you have made the same choice? Could you have found the capacity to forgive David if you were in Lena's shoes, facing such a profound betrayal? What would you have done differently, given the same agonizing circumstances? And remember this, always. Choose communication over corrosive silence. Choose honesty over insidious deception. Choose love over paralyzing fear. Choose to be truly free without making someone else pay the ultimate, irreversible price for your liberation. Because once you cross that unforgivable line, once you hire someone to sever the very lifeblood of a vehicle, once you choose murder over the sanctity of marriage, you can never, ever unchoose it, and the mundane, innocent sound of a penny scraping silver against a lottery ticket will never, ever sound the same again. This has been Alex River with True Crime. Until next time, stay safe. For over 50 years, William Bill Anderson, an 80-year-old African-American veteran, had meticulously built his life within the comforting embrace of the Willow Creek community. He was a man etched from the very essence of honor, discipline, and a quiet, unassuming strength. In a town where character was measured not by words but by deeds, William was known as the bedrock, the unwavering constant, someone you could always, without a doubt, count on. He had served his country with an unyielding pride, returning home after years in uniform, his heart brimming with the promise of the American dream. And he had achieved it, piece by meticulous piece. A modest house nestled amongst sprawling oak trees, a devoted wife, and children who filled their lives with an abundance of love and purpose. William was a man who spoke through his actions, his quiet power resonating far louder than any rhetoric. Whether it was the rhythmic clang of his hammer as he repaired a neighbor's sagging fence, the measured wisdom he offered to younger men grappling with life's challenges, or the solemn reverence with which he led prayers at the local church, he commanded respect not by demanding it, but by quietly earning it, day after painstaking day. His family, above all else, was his magnum opus, his greatest accomplishment, a living testament to his steadfast commitment. He would often retreat to the worn comfort of his porch in the soft twilight hours, his gaze fixed on the sun bleeding into the horizon beyond the ancient trees. A faint, almost imperceptible smile would play on his lips as he watched his grown children come and go, their lives intertwining with his, each thread contributing to the vibrant tapestry of the Anderson clan. In William's meticulously ordered world, family was not merely important, it was everything. It was the sacred, unbreakable pact, the very reason for his existence. On the surface, the Anderson family appeared to be the quintessential picture of domestic bliss, a beacon of unity in Willow Creek. 4 children, each a testament to the values instilled within them, had blossomed under the nurturing roof of a home brimming with an unwavering discipline, an overflowing love, and the intoxicating aroma of Sarah Anderson's legendary Sunday roasts. Sarah, William's wife of half a century, was the quiet, unwavering force, the emotional glue that held their entire world together. With her gentle demeanor, her hands calloused from years of tireless work, and a heart overflowing with boundless affection, she didn't just make the house a home, she breathed life into it. She raised their children not just to survive, but to truly thrive, instilling in them a reverence for family that bordered on the sacred, teaching them to cherish that bond above all else. Neighbors often spoke of Sarah in hushed, reverent tones, calling her a blessing, a woman with an uncanny ability to transmute any hardship into a glimmer of hope, her unwavering faith and boundless love acting as a guiding star in their lives. Their children, in William's eyes, were not merely offspring. They were his living legacy, extensions of his very soul, his heart walking outside his body. Michael Anderson, the eldest son at 48, was the undeniable mirror image of William. Strong, steady, and possessing an unyielding work ethic, he was always the first to step forward, to shoulder the heaviest burdens, to ensure that whatever needed to be done was done with unwavering diligence. Growing up, Michael had spent countless hours at William's side, their hands greasy from fixing stubborn car engines, their backs aching from tending to the sprawling yard. He was the family's steadfast right-hand man, the William trusted implicitly, the quiet confidant who understood him without the need for words. Olivia Anderson, the 46-year-old daughter, was the nurturing heart of the group, a loving mother in her own right, who held sacred the traditions Sarah had so lovingly instilled in her. Olivia was the quiet orchestrator, the one who effortlessly kept everyone connected. Her phone calls a soothing balm, her meticulously organized family dinners a joyful ritual, ensuring that holidays were not just celebrated but truly experienced together. To Olivia, the concept of family was not just important, it was holy, a sacred trust she carried with her every single day, her devotion unwavering. David Anderson, the 43-year-old middle son, possessed an infectious energy, a radiant light that he carried with him wherever he went. Outgoing, effortlessly charming, and undeniably successful, David's infectious smile was his unmistakable signature. He was the master of breaking tension with a perfectly timed joke, the wizard who could lighten the mood when life's inevitable burdens grew too heavy. People gravitated towards him, drawn in by his magnetic personality, and William, in his own quiet, understated way, took immense pride in David's innate ability to stand out from the crowd, to carve out a path for himself, to truly make something of his life. And then there was Chloe Anderson, the youngest at 38, the undisputed free spirit of the family, and undeniably William's absolute favorite. As his baby girl, Chloe could, it seemed, do no wrong in William's adoring eyes. She was a whirlwind of creativity, a boundless fount of life, and fiercely, almost possessively, loyal to her father. Despite her adventurous, independent nature, Chloe always, without fail, found time to sit with William on the porch, their laughter echoing through the twilight, their voices soft as they reminisced about shared memories, weaving new tales into the rich tapestry of their past. Together, they were a family admired by all who knew them, a shining symbol of unity, an embodiment of resilience, and a living testament to the enduring power of tradition. They were, to the outside world, flawless. But beneath that polished surface, a festering secret lay dormant, waiting for the most unsuspecting of catalysts to bring it to light, to shatter the idyllic facade and expose the rot that had been silently gnawing at the foundations of the Anderson family for half a century. The calm before the storm was about to give way to a tempest of epic proportions, and the lives of William and Sarah Anderson, along with their unsuspecting children, were about to be irrevocably changed forever. The air in the Anderson home on William's 80th birthday was thick with the joyous clamor of a family celebrating. A harmonious symphony of laughter, good cheer, and the tantalizing aroma of Sarah's legendary collard greens simmering gently in the kitchen. It was a day designed for warmth, for reminiscing, for the simple pleasure of being surrounded by loved ones. The house, usually a bastion of quiet routine, buzzed with an almost palpable energy, reflecting the deep affection the family held for its patriarch. William, seated at the head of the long dining table, his face crinkling with a contentment that came from decades of a life well lived, soaked it all in. A man truly at peace. He watched his children and grandchildren move about, their voices a comforting melody, their presence a testament to the beautiful life he had so painstakingly built. This was his legacy, embodied in every smiling face, every shared embrace. Amongst the thoughtful gifts, wrapped in colorful paper and adorned with festive bows, was one that seemed to stand out, not for its extravagance, but for its whimsical nature. It was presented by Chloe, his youngest and undeniably his favorite, her eyes sparkling with an almost childlike excitement as she placed the small, unassuming box into his hands. "Daddy," she chirped, her voice a cascade of pure delight, her smile wide and infectious. "I thought it'd be fun to learn more about our family history, you know, where we come from." It was an Ancestry DNA kit, a popular novelty that promised to unlock the mysteries of one's lineage with a simple swab. William chuckled softly, a deep, rumbling sound that spoke of contentment and gentle amusement, shaking his head with a playful dismissal. "Girl, I already know where I come from," he quipped, his gaze sweeping around the familiar warmth of his home. "Right here." The unspoken sentiment was clear. His roots were firmly planted in the love and lives that surrounded him, in the very heart of Willow Creek, with his beloved Sarah and their 4 children. He had no need for complicated charts or scientific explanations to tell him who he was or where he belonged. Yet, with the good-natured urging of his children, their faces alight with encouragement, he accepted the gift. To William, it was nothing more than a playful gesture, a charming novelty from the daughter he adored, a fleeting curiosity in the grand scheme of his settled life. He didn't give it a second thought, tucking it away with the other gifts, assuming it would likely be forgotten amidst the daily rhythms of his familiar existence. The innocent nature of the gift, the sheer harmlessness of its intent, veiled the seismic shift it was about to unleash, a testament to how the most profound changes can stem from the most insignificant of beginnings. The universe, in its ironic wisdom, had set a trap, baited with curiosity and wrapped in filial affection. Later that evening, as the last of the guests departed, leaving behind a comforting hush in the house, William found himself alone in his favorite armchair, the DNA kit nestled in his hands. The directions were remarkably simple, almost deceptively so. A quick swab of the cheek, seal the sample securely in its container, and then simply mail it off. As William, with the practiced steadiness of a man who had faced and overcome countless challenges, carefully followed each instruction, a faint, nostalgic smile touched his lips. He couldn't help but marvel at the relentless march of time, at how dramatically the world had transformed in his 80 years. Here he was, an octogenarian, holding in his hands a piece of technology that promised to reveal secrets his own ancestors, even in their wildest dreams, could never have conceived. It was a curious marvel, a testament to human ingenuity, a harmless little adventure into the past. A close-up visual of his hands, steady yet beautifully wrinkled with age, carefully placing the small cotton swab into its sterile container, would have captured the quiet reverence of the moment. There was no urgency, no trepidation, just the gentle precision of a man engaged in a simple, almost meditative task. A slow, lingering shot of the small, unassuming package being dropped into the mouth of a mailbox, bathed in the soft, golden glow of the setting sun, would have perfectly encapsulated the profound significance of that seemingly innocuous moment. It was a quiet, almost poetic act, one that appeared utterly harmless, utterly devoid of threat. Yet this single, solitary act, this small gesture of compliant curiosity, held within its very core the unfathomable power to change everything William Anderson knew, everything he cherished, everything he had built, irrevocably and forever. The mailing of that tiny package, under the watchful, innocent gaze of the fading day, was the silent, unseen trigger of a catastrophe waiting to unfold, the first gentle ripple of a tsunami about to engulf his life. It was a seemingly insignificant detail that would, in retrospect, loom large as the precise point of no return. Weeks bled into months, as weeks often do, and the DNA test, once a momentary distraction, was quickly relegated to the forgotten corners of William's mind as life in its comforting predictability carried on. The rhythms of his existence, established and honed over 8 decades, resumed their gentle, familiar cadence. His mornings were filled with the crisp air of early walks, a time for quiet contemplation and greeting the dawn. Sundays were reserved for the unwavering rituals of church services, where he found solace and community in faith. His afternoons often found him settled on the welcoming expanse of his porch, a book in hand, or simply watching the world drift by, a testament to a life of quiet contentment. Inside the house, Sarah hummed tunelessly as she prepared dinner, her presence a warm, familiar anchor. Their children, busy with their own lives, called regularly or stopped by when their schedules allowed, their visits a welcome punctuation to the peaceful days. Everything, to William's discerning eye, was precisely as it had always been, tranquil, beautifully simple, and utterly, reassuringly familiar. The world outside continued its turning, oblivious to the ticking time bomb that had been set in motion by a simple birthday gift. Or so William thought. This innocent birthday present, this fleeting flicker of curiosity about his distant roots, was not destined to be forgotten. It was, instead, a meticulously placed key designed to unlock a Pandora's box of secrets that had been buried so deeply, concealed beneath so many layers of love and routine, that no one, not even Sarah, the silent keeper of these devastating truths, could have possibly predicted the cataclysm that was about to erupt. The unassuming package, now making its way through the postal system, carried not just genetic information, but the very seeds of destruction, poised to germinate and flourish into a nightmare that would consume the Anderson family, leaving behind a legacy of broken trust and unimaginable pain. The quiet hum of the familiar was about to be replaced by the deafening roar of revelation, and William Anderson's carefully constructed world was about to be torn asunder by the very threads he believed were woven from love. Or so William thought. This innocent birthday present, this fleeting flicker of curiosity about his distant roots, was not destined to be forgotten. It was, instead, a meticulously placed key designed to unlock a Pandora's box of secrets that had been buried so deeply, concealed beneath so many layers of love and routine, that no one, not even Sarah, the silent keeper of these devastating truths, could have possibly predicted the cataclysm that was about to erupt. The unassuming package, now making its way through the postal system, carried not just genetic information, but the very seeds of destruction, poised to germinate and flourish into a nightmare that would consume the Anderson family, leaving behind a legacy of broken trust and unimaginable pain. The quiet hum of the familiar was about to be replaced by the deafening roar of revelation, and William Anderson's carefully constructed world was about to be torn asunder by the very threads he believed were woven from love. William Anderson had always believed life had an inherent rhythm, a comforting cadence shaped by an unwavering routine, the familiar embrace of family, and the steadfast solace of faith. At 80 years old, his days were filled with a quiet purpose, morning walks that invigorated his spirit, shared meals with his beloved Sarah, and peaceful afternoons spent offering his time and wisdom at their local church. William was, without a doubt, a pillar of his community. He was a quiet man, certainly, but one defined by discipline and honor, admired universally for his distinguished role as a veteran, a devoted father, and a husband who, for over 5 decades, had dedicated himself fully to his marriage. The stability of his life was a testament to his character, a well-ordered existence that reflected his inner strength and unwavering principles. The day the DNA results finally arrived began, deceptively, like any other. The unassuming envelope had been sitting on the kitchen counter for several days, almost completely forgotten amidst the usual clutter of daily life, beneath church flyers detailing upcoming charity events and Sarah's neatly handwritten shopping lists. William hadn't been actively avoiding it. Rather, the preparations for the annual charity event at church had simply consumed all his attention. He and Sarah had been too immersed in their bustling activities to spare a thought for the small, innocuous package that held such a devastating secret. But this particular evening was different. The house was bathed in a profound quietness, a stillness that amplified the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Sarah had gone to visit Olivia, leaving William alone, companionless, with nothing but his own thoughts and that unopened envelope, lying there on the counter like a silent accusation. Curiosity, a subtle yet powerful force, finally got the better of him. William settled himself at the sturdy kitchen table, a warm mug of coffee clutched in his hand, and, with a slow, deliberate movement, he tore open the envelope. He expected, with a gentle sense of anticipation, to discover fascinating insights into his ancestry, perhaps a distant relative he never knew, or a surprising geographical origin. What he found instead was utterly unthinkable. The initial medical jargon within the report made little sense at first, confusing and coldly clinical. His eyes, however, soon landed on a section labeled Immediate Family Matches. His own name was listed clearly, unambiguously, but then his gaze dropped to the section where his children's matches should have been. And there, a gaping void stared back at him. William froze. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. His hands, usually so steady, began to tremble uncontrollably as he reread the report, again and again, as if the words themselves might miraculously change, morph into something less horrifying. His 4 children, the ones he had loved, nurtured, raised with every ounce of his being, the ones he had proudly called his own, were not, could not be, biologically his. For hours, William remained rooted at the kitchen table, the damning paper spread before him, not just a document, but an accusation, a betrayal made manifest. He felt his stomach twist into a knot of agonizing despair. His entire world, everything he had ever believed in, cracked wide open, irrevocably shattered. But he needed to hear it from Sarah. She had to explain this incomprehensible nightmare. There simply had to be an answer, a logical explanation for this unfathomable void. The next evening, Sarah returned home from a church meeting, her steps light, her mind still humming with the hymns and fellowship of the evening. She found William sitting in the living room, a chilling stillness about him, the crumpled DNA report resting ominously in his lap. She offered him a gentle smile, placing her purse down without a hint of the storm that was about to break, completely unaware of the devastating truth that lay waiting for her. "Sarah," William said, his voice surprisingly firm yet disturbingly low and steady. "Sit down." Her brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of concern crossing her features, as she slowly lowered herself into the armchair directly across from him. William didn't look at her at first. His gaze was fixed on some distant point, his silence heavy with unspoken accusations. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he simply handed her the report. "What's this?" Sarah asked, a casual curiosity in her voice as she glanced at the paper. "Read it," William replied, his tone colder than she had ever heard it, his eyes fixed unblinkingly on her face, waiting. Sarah skimmed the page, her expression shifting, almost imperceptibly at first, from mild confusion to utter shock. Her lips pressed tightly together, a line of denial, as she instinctively shoved the paper back toward him. "William, this doesn't mean anything," she insisted, her voice trembling slightly, a desperate attempt at dismissal. "Those tests, they're never correct. I've heard about things like this before. It's a mistake." But William's gaze only hardened, his jaw clenching with an unspoken fury. "A mistake?" he repeated, his voice laced with venom. "That paper says I'm not their father, Sarah. Not one of them." Sarah waved her hand dismissively, refusing to meet his piercing eyes, her own darting nervously around the room. "Those companies get things wrong all the time. You're letting this nonsense get in your head. You know how much you mean to this family, William. This changes nothing." William's hand slammed down onto the coffee table with a sudden, thunderous force, making Sarah jump, her composure finally shattering. "Don't lie to me," he barked, his voice raw with pain and rage. "Don't you dare lie to me again, Sarah. I need the truth." "I am telling the truth," she insisted, her voice rising now with a desperate, almost panicked edge. "Those children are yours. You raised them, William. You are their father. Blood doesn't change that." William stood up abruptly, beginning to pace the room, the damning paper crumpled in his trembling hands. He didn't know what was worse, the horrifying truth revealed by the report, or Sarah's steadfast, infuriating refusal to acknowledge it. Her continued insistence on a lie that had consumed half a century of his life. Finally, he stopped pacing, turning to face her, his voice quieter now, but imbued with a terrifying calm. "You know what?" he said, his gaze piercing through her. "I don't need you to admit it. I'll show Michael." The battle lines had been drawn. The truth, like a corrosive acid, was beginning to eat away at the very fabric of their lives. The following day, under the thin pretense of needing help with some yard work, William called Michael over. Michael, ever the dutiful eldest son, showed up without hesitation, his presence a comforting, familiar sight. At 48, he was the mirror image of William, strong, steady, and utterly reliable. William watched his son for a moment, his heart a heavy, aching weight in his chest, as Michael bent with practiced ease to pull weeds from the vibrant flower bed. The scene was so normal, so peaceful, a stark contrast to the maelstrom brewing within William. "Michael," William said finally, his voice tight with suppressed emotion, "come inside. I need to talk to you." Inside the house, William led Michael to the kitchen table, the very same table where he had opened the devastating DNA results just days earlier, the silent witness to his world's unraveling. With a heavy heart, William placed the crumpled report in front of him. "What's this?" Michael asked, a frown creasing his brow as he unfolded the paper, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "Just read it," William said, his voice a strained whisper, his eyes never leaving his son's face, searching for a reaction, a flicker of understanding, anything. Michael skimmed the document quickly, his expression shifting, subtly at first, then more dramatically as he processed the cold, hard words on the page. "What is this supposed to mean?" he asked, his voice cautious, a nascent fear beginning to take root. William's jaw clenched, his voice trembling with a mixture of raw anger and profound pain. "It means you're not my son," he said, the words tearing from his throat. "None of you are. That test says I'm not your father, Michael." Michael stared at William, confusion battling with sheer disbelief plastered across his face. "What do you talking about?" he stammered, his voice rising in incredulity. "That doesn't make sense, Dad. Of course you're my father." William shook his head, his voice now a broken whisper, raw with the agony of a lifetime of deception. "Look at the paper. It's right there. 0. I'm not your father, Michael. I'm not anybody's father." Michael's expression hardened, a sudden fierce protectiveness rising within him as he pushed the paper back toward William, as if the physical act could erase the unthinkable words. "Where did this even come from?" he demanded, his voice tinged with accusation. "One of those DNA kits? You're telling me you believe this over 48 years of being my dad? This is ridiculous." William slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing through the quiet kitchen, a desperate cry of anguish. "Don't you think I want this to be wrong?" he pleaded, his voice cracking with the unbearable weight of his pain. "Don't you think I wish this was a mistake?" He paused, his voice dropping to a barely audible whisper, raw with a vulnerability he rarely showed. "But I can't deny what's right in front of me. Someone's been lying to me for 50 years. Michael stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor, the harsh sound a punctuation mark to the escalating tension. "I don't care what that paper says," he declared, his voice resolute, defiant. "I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense." William watched his son storm out, the door slamming shut behind him with a jarring finality. For a moment, the house was plunged into a deafening silence, but inside William's mind there was nothing but chaos, a swirling vortex of anger, hurt, and utter devastation. Sarah had denied it. Now Michael refused to believe it. But the truth, stark and unyielding on that crumpled paper, would not simply vanish, no matter how desperately anyone wished to ignore it. And deep down, in the fractured remnants of his soul, William knew that this was only the beginning. The house, once a sanctuary of love and familiarity, was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and the fight had just begun. The atmosphere in the Anderson living room on that fateful Sunday afternoon was a suffocating shroud of tension, heavy and palpable, crackling with unspoken words and festering resentments. The air itself seemed to thrum with a dark energy, a precursor to the cataclysm that was about to unfold. William had called a family meeting, a command more than an invitation, and his tone had brooked no argument. Sarah sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face a mask of weary apprehension. Michael, Olivia, David, and Chloe were all present, their expressions a mixture of confusion, suspicion, and a nascent, unsettling fear. Each of them, in their own way, sensed the precariousness of the moment, the fragile peace that was about to shatter. The comfortable, familiar space, usually a haven of warmth and laughter, felt like a courtroom, with William as the silent, unyielding judge. William stood before them, the crumpled DNA report now smoothed out, its damning words poised to tear apart the carefully constructed tapestry of their lives. His voice, when it came, was a raw, guttural sound, stripped bare of its usual gentle warmth, resonating with a profound, almost terrifying sorrow. "I asked you all to come here," he began, his gaze sweeping over each of his children, lingering on Michael, who still carried the weight of their last confrontation. Because there's something you all need to know. Something your mother has kept from all of us for 50 years. Sarah flinched, a small, involuntary movement, as if struck. The children exchanged nervous glances, their questions unspoken, their eyes wide with a growing dread. Then William laid bare the horrifying truth. He spoke of the DNA test, of the 0% genetic relationship, of the betrayal that had ripped the heart out of his very being. He didn't scream, he didn't rant. His voice was a chillingly calm, almost desolate monotone. Each word a hammer blow, systematically dismantling the foundations of their shared reality. This, he stated, holding up the report, his hand trembling slightly, this says that none of you are my biological children, not one. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum where laughter and conversation once thrived. Michael, who had dismissed his father's words just days before, felt a cold dread creep into his stomach. Olivia gasped, a choked, heartbroken sound, her hand flying to her mouth. David's face, usually so expressive, was now a mask of shocked disbelief, his eyes wide and unblinking. Chloe, the vivacious, fiercely loyal youngest, stared at her father, her beloved daddy, as if he had suddenly transformed into a stranger. A collective wave of disbelief washed over them, a powerful current of denial, followed swiftly by a crushing wave of profound grief. Their father, their rock, the very essence of their family, was telling them their entire lives, their very identities, had been built on a monumental lie. All eyes turned to Sarah, now the focal point of their collective horror, their desperate pleas for an explanation. Her face was ashen, her composure finally crumbling under the weight of decades of deceit. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a barely audible whisper, thick with shame and a desperate plea for understanding. I can explain," she stammered, her gaze fixed on the floor, unable to meet the accusatory stares of her children or the burning, heartbroken gaze of her husband. And then the confessions began to trickle out. A slow, agonizing unraveling of a lifetime of hidden truths. Sarah spoke of loneliness, of a young wife's fleeting moments of weakness, of liaisons with other men during William's long deployments, moments of desperate human connection in the vast, isolating stretches of absence. She spoke of the fear, the crushing fear of discovery, of losing everything she held dear, of the quiet desperation that had driven her to maintain the elaborate facade for so long. She revealed the names of some of the biological fathers, though not all, carefully omitting the more painful details. But one name resonated with a chilling familiarity: Arthur Jenkins. Arthur, a man William had known for decades, a man he had considered a trusted friend, a confidant, the very definition of a neighbor, a man William had seen almost daily, unaware that he was looking into the eyes of one of his children's biological fathers. The revelation of Arthur Jenkins's involvement landed like a punch to William's gut, twisting the knife already plunged into his heart. It wasn't just the betrayal from his wife, it was the betrayal from a friend, a double-edged sword that sliced away at his last vestiges of trust. As Sarah continued to speak, her voice thick with tears, William found himself in a terrifying maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The initial shock had morphed into a blinding rage, a cold, incandescent fury that simmered beneath his carefully controlled exterior. But beneath the anger, there was a profound, almost crippling sorrow. He remembered fleeting moments from the past, seemingly innocuous details he had dismissed. Tiny incongruities that now, with the brutal clarity of hindsight, screamed of deceit. A hurried phone call Sarah had taken in another room, a nervous glance she had exchanged with a stranger, a sudden uncharacteristic defensiveness in her tone when certain topics arose. He had dismissed them all, attributed them to the anxieties of a loving wife, the mundane quirks of a long marriage. Now, these innocent memories warped into grotesque distortions, each one a testament to the colossal deception that had defined his entire adult life. He realized with a sickening lurch of his stomach that the life he had so proudly built was a meticulously crafted illusion, a house of cards poised to collapse. The children, too, were reeling. Michael, the steadfast, dependable son, felt his world tilt violently. The very notion of his father, the man he had idolized, being a stranger, was an unbearable weight. Olivia wept silently, her heart breaking for her parents, for the shattered innocence of their family. David, usually so buoyant and charismatic, sat in stunned silence, his usual charm replaced by a bewildered pain. And Chloe, his baby girl, the one who had so innocently given him the tool of his own destruction, stared at her mother with wide, accusing eyes, her loyalty to William now unwavering, her heart heavy with the weight of this unforeseen betrayal. The unity they once shared, the unbreakable bond that defined the Andersons, was now fractured, perhaps irrevocably so. In the days that followed, William Anderson became a shadow of his former self. His morning walks, once a source of quiet contemplation, became restless, agitated patrols. His presence at church, once a beacon of steadfast faith, dwindled to sporadic, distracted appearances. The vibrant joy that had once illuminated his eyes was now replaced by a haunted, distant stare, as if he were constantly seeing something no one else could. He began to isolate himself, retreating deeper into the dark cavern of his pain, pushing away his children, even Michael, who tried desperately to bridge the widening chasm. The family home, once filled with the warmth of shared lives, now resonated with a chilling silence, broken only by the occasional strained whispers. William's mind, once so meticulously ordered and rational, became consumed by an all-encompassing obsession, the betrayal. He began to replay every memory, every conversation, every glance, searching for more hidden clues, for further evidence of the deception that had defined his adult life. The faces of men he had known for years, men he had trusted, now appeared in his tortured thoughts, twisted by suspicion, each one a potential betrayer. He found himself walking aimlessly through Willow Creek, his eyes scanning familiar faces, searching for the phantom reflections of his children in the features of strangers, each casual encounter a fresh stab of agony. The once tranquil countryside, his beloved home, now felt like a suffocating cage, teeming with unknown enemies, with the ghosts of past betrayals. Sarah, desperate to quell the raging storm she had unleashed, to somehow mitigate the irreparable damage, made a fateful suggestion. "William," she began, her voice tentative, almost pleading, Arthur has been asking about you. He knows you're upset. He wants to talk, to explain things. Perhaps if you just spoke to him, cleared the air." William looked at her, his eyes cold and unblinking. Explain what? Explain 50 years of lies? Explain why he had allowed this charade to continue? He felt a dangerous, simmering resentment for Sarah's desperation, her naive belief that mere words could mend the gaping wound that had been torn in his soul. Yet a morbid curiosity, a twisted desire for answers, began to take root in his tormented mind. He wanted to look Arthur Jenkins in the eye, to see the man who had so casually participated in the demolition of his life, to demand an explanation for a betrayal so profound it transcended friendship, honor, and basic human decency. Against his better judgment and fueled by a burning need for confrontation, William agreed to meet Arthur. Sarah, desperate for any semblance of resolution, arranged a dinner at Arthur's home, hoping that a controlled environment of forced politeness might somehow diffuse the explosive tension. But as William prepared to leave, a chilling stillness settled over him, a premonition of the irreversible path he was now walking. He strapped his old service pistol to his hip, a silent, grim companion, a relic of a past life of duty and protection, now imbued with a terrifying new purpose. His mind, clouded by grief and rage, saw only one path forward, a confrontation that would either bring him peace or unleash a darkness from which there would be no return. The tranquil evening, the simple dinner invitation, was merely a veil for the inevitable, a flimsy curtain drawn before the final, tragic act. William Anderson was not going to a dinner. He was walking into a storm of his own making, a storm that would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone in Willow Creek forever. And the quiet, unsuspecting town, so accustomed to its serene existence, was about to witness the shocking, horrifying climax of a secret that had been kept for half a century. The turning point was here, and it was cloaked in the darkest of intentions. The sun, a fiery orb sinking below the horizon, cast long, distorted shadows across the manicured lawn of Arthur Jenkins's home. What began as Sarah's desperate attempt at reconciliation, a quiet dinner intended to clear the air, quickly devolved into a terrifying tableau of rage, despair, and an unimaginable act of violence. William Anderson, the decorated veteran, the man who had always epitomized control and honor, stood on the precipice of a devastating breakdown, his mind consumed by a half-century of betrayal. The small, unassuming house, nestled in a quiet cul-de-sac of Willow Creek, was about to become the epicenter of a tragedy that would scar the town forever. As William stepped through the threshold of Arthur Jenkins's home, a chilling calm settled over him, a deceptive tranquility that masked the raging tempest within. Sarah, her face etched with a desperate hope, led him into the dimly lit living room where Arthur sat, seemingly composed, a faint, almost pitying smile playing on his lips. The air was thick with unspoken tension, the silence more unsettling than any shouts. William's eyes, cold and piercing, locked on to Arthur's. He didn't offer a greeting, didn't extend a hand. Instead, his voice, when it came, was a low, guttural growl, stripped of all warmth, all civility. "Arthur," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, yet resonating with terrifying intensity. "You knew. All these years you knew. You broke bread in my home. You watched my children grow. Children you knew were yours, and you said nothing." Arthur, sensing the dangerous shift in William's demeanor, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He attempted to offer an explanation, a mumbled apology about mistakes made in the past, about trying to protect Sarah, but his words were hollow, ringing with insincerity. William cut him off, his voice rising, laced with an incandescent fury that had simmered for weeks. "Protect her?" he roared, his fists clenching at his sides. "You protected her lies. You allowed me to raise children that were not mine. 50 years, Arthur, 50 years of a lie." The confrontation escalated rapidly, the strained politeness of the evening evaporating under the heat of William's unleashed rage. Arthur, initially attempting to pacify William with placating words, grew defensive, his own voice rising in a futile attempt to justify his actions, or perhaps simply to shield himself from the brutal honesty of William's accusations. He even dared to suggest that William's age was making him forget things, an unforgivable slight that ignited a fresh, dangerous spark in William's tormented mind. Sarah, witnessing the volatile exchange, panicked. She instinctively tried to step between the two men, her arms outstretched, her voice a desperate plea. "William, no! Please stop! It's not worth it!" But her pleas were drowned out by the thunderous roar of William's anger, a lifetime of suppressed hurt and betrayal finally erupting with cataclysmic force. In a blur of motion, William reached for the old service pistol strapped to his hip, a familiar weight in his trembling hand. The metallic click of the safety being disengaged echoed ominously in the sudden, terrifying silence. Before Arthur could react, before Sarah could fully comprehend the horrifying trajectory of events, a gunshot ripped through the quiet evening air, deafening in its finality. Arthur Jenkins slumped forward, a stunned expression frozen on his face, a crimson stain blossoming rapidly on his shirt. He was dead before he hit the ground. The smell of gunpowder, acrid and metallic, instantly filled the room, a chilling testament to the irreversible act that had just transpired. Sarah screamed, a primal sound of pure terror and despair, rushing towards Arthur's fallen body, her mind reeling from the brutal swiftness of it all. As she knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she touched his still form, William, his face a mask of cold, unseeing fury, fired again. The second shot, equally deafening, struck Sarah, silencing her scream and sending her collapsing to the floor beside Arthur, her life extinguished in a single, tragic moment. The room, moments ago filled with the suffocating tension of an unspoken truth, was now eerily quiet, save for the faint ringing in William's ears and the thudding of his own broken heart. Two lives, inextricably linked by a web of deceit, were now extinguished by the very truth they had so desperately tried to conceal. In the immediate aftermath, William did not flee. There was no escape, not from the horror he had just unleashed, nor from the crushing weight of his own tormented soul. He stood over the fallen bodies, his pistol still clutched in his hand, his gaze distant and hollow, as if the reality of his actions had yet to fully register. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he holstered his weapon. He walked out of Arthur's house, leaving the silent, bloody scene behind him, the cool evening air a stark contrast to the inferno within. His next action was both shocking and chillingly methodical. He drove directly to Michael's house, the familiar route passing under the watchful gaze of the moon. He knocked on the door, his hand steady, his face devoid of emotion. Michael, who had been trying to make sense of the past few days, opened the door, a look of weary concern on his face. He took one look at his father's haunted eyes, at the unsettling calm that emanated from him, and knew instinctively that something terrible had happened. "Michael," William said, his voice flat, emotionless, I've done something. I killed Arthur. And your mother. I killed them both." He paused, his gaze meeting Michael's, a flicker of something akin to despair in their depths. "Call the police, son. Tell them I'm here. Tell them what I've done." The words hung heavy in the air, a devastating confession that shattered the last vestiges of normalcy in Michael's life. He stared at his father, his mind reeling, a silent scream trapped in his throat. This wasn't the father he knew, the honorable, gentle man who had raised him. This was a stranger, a broken vessel consumed by a grief so profound it had twisted him into a murderer. Michael, with trembling hands, picked up the phone, his world crumbling around him. The arrival of the police was swift and decisive. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second, their mournful cry a stark contrast to the quiet devastation that had unfolded. Squad cars descended upon Michael's home, their flashing blue and red lights painting the familiar street in an eerie, pulsing glow. William surrendered without resistance, his movements slow, almost mechanical, as if the life force had drained from him. He offered no struggle, no denial, only a quiet, resigned acceptance of his fate. He was handcuffed, the cold steel biting into his wrists, and led away, a solemn figure disappearing into the flashing lights, his silhouette growing smaller with each step, his life as a free man irreversibly over. The investigation that followed was swift, yet harrowing. The scene at Arthur Jenkins's home was meticulously processed, every detail of the horrific crime documented, every piece of evidence painstakingly collected. The medical examiner's reports confirmed the brutal, undeniable truth. Arthur Jenkins and Sarah Anderson had both died from gunshot wounds. William's confession, given freely and without coercion, painted a chillingly clear picture of the motive. Years of unacknowledged betrayal, a festering wound that had finally erupted into a violent, fatal act. In the ensuing trial, William Anderson pleaded guilty to both murders. He did not seek to defend his actions, did not offer any mitigation for his crime. His demeanor throughout the proceedings was one of quiet, almost resigned acceptance. He had confessed, and he seemed to believe that his fate was sealed, a just retribution for the unspeakable pain he had inflicted, and the profound pain he had endured. His legal team, though prepared to argue a temporary insanity defense brought on by extreme emotional distress, found their efforts met with a stoic refusal from William. He offered no testimony, no tearful plea for mercy, no attempt to escape the consequences of his actions. He simply sat, a broken man, bearing the crushing weight of his crime and the unbearable burden of a lifetime of deceit. The jury, moved by the raw facts of the case and the undeniable evidence, delivered a swift verdict. William Anderson was found guilty on 2 counts of murder. The judge, his voice heavy with the gravity of the sentence, condemned William to life in prison without the possibility of parole. William barely reacted. He simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible movement, as if he had already accepted this grim fate long before the words were even uttered. For William, perhaps, the freedom he had lost was already an illusion, shattered by the truth that had consumed him. The judgment, for him, was merely a formality. The true sentence had been delivered the moment he discovered the devastating secret, the moment his world had irrevocably unraveled. And in the quiet, solemn courtroom, the true weight of the tragedy began to settle, not just on the convicted, but on the unsuspecting children left behind, their lives irrevocably scarred by the unraveling of their family. The verdict, though anticipated, sent a chilling tremor through the hearts of those who had followed the Anderson case, a stark reminder of the devastating consequences when buried truths finally claw their way to the surface. William Anderson, the man who had once embodied the very spirit of honor and steadfastness in Willow Creek, now faced a life behind bars, a somber echo of the freedom he had lost, a freedom that had, perhaps, always been an illusion. He sat in the courtroom, his shoulders slightly stooped, his gaze distant, as if already inhabiting the desolate landscape of his future. The judge's voice, heavy with the weight of justice, pronounced the sentence, life in prison, without the possibility of parole. William offered no resistance, no plea, no visible emotion. He simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a fate he seemed to have accepted long ago, his journey through betrayal and rage culminating in this final, inescapable destination. But for the Anderson children, Michael, Olivia, David, and Chloe, the fallout was far more devastating, a maelstrom of loss and incomprehensible pain. In a matter of moments, their entire world had been irrevocably shattered. They had lost their mother to a senseless act of violence, and their father, the man they had always known, was now a convicted murderer, forever confined to a life of incarceration. The very foundation of their existence, built upon what they believed was unwavering love and truth, had crumbled into dust, leaving them adrift in a sea of grief, anger, and profound confusion. They were now orphans in a sense, burdened by a legacy of secrets and a tragedy that no child should ever have to bear. In the quiet, echoing courtroom, Michael, Olivia, David, and Chloe sat together, their faces etched with a raw, almost unbearable grief. Their eyes, once bright with the simple joys of family life, were now hollow, shadowed by the weight of their profound loss. They were left to navigate a world suddenly devoid of their parents, a world where the very concept of family had been twisted into something unrecognizable and painful. The questions that swirled in their minds were endless, each one a fresh stab of agony. How could their mother have kept such a monumental secret for so long? How could their father, a man of such honor, have been driven to such a horrific act? And what now, for them? The innocent casualties of a betrayal that spanned generations. Their lives, once so interwoven with the familiar rhythms of the Anderson family, were now forced onto divergent paths, each sibling grappling with their pain in different ways. Michael, the eldest, felt the crushing weight of responsibility, attempting to hold together the fragile remnants of their family, even as his own heart bled. Olivia, the nurturer, found solace in caring for her own children, fiercely protecting them from the echoes of the past, even as she struggled to reconcile the image of her loving mother with the woman who harbored such profound secrets. David, the outgoing and charismatic, retreated into a shell of quiet contemplation, his laughter replaced by a somber silence, the joy he once exuded replaced by a deep-seated melancholy. And Chloe, the youngest, the one who had unknowingly triggered the entire catastrophe, wrestled with a unique burden of guilt and sorrow, forever haunted by the innocent gift that had unleashed such destruction. They carried the invisible scars of a story they never asked to be a part of, a narrative born of love and deceit, of profound trust and ultimate betrayal. The tragic case of William and Sarah Anderson and the devastating ripple effect on their children forces us to confront an uncomfortable and profoundly unsettling truth. Trust, no matter how solid it seems, no matter how deeply ingrained, can shatter in an instant. It is a fragile construct, easily broken, and devastatingly difficult to repair. This story, in its rawest form, is a stark testament to the perilous nature of secrets, particularly those woven into the very fabric of intimate relationships. Lies, even those told with the misguided intention of protecting others, fester in the darkness, growing, twisting, until they inevitably erupt, leaving behind a trail of ruin that extends far beyond the initial deception. This case compels us to ask profound questions about the very foundation of family. How fragile is the bond of a family when it is built on lies, no matter how deeply buried or carefully maintained? What is the true, immeasurable price of betrayal when it destroys not just individuals caught in its immediate wake, but extends its destructive reach across generations, leaving indelible scars on those who bear no fault? This story, in its rawest form, is not merely about a crime of passion or a moment of extreme rage. It is a haunting narrative about the breaking of a man, a once honorable soul who believed he had given everything, who had poured his very essence into building a life, only to discover, in the twilight of his years, that the most fundamental truths he clung to were nothing more than a meticulously crafted illusion. He had sacrificed, he had loved, he had endured, all under the false pretense of a life he believed was his, only to be stripped of every cherished belief, every comforting certainty, in the most brutal and public way imaginable. If this heartbreaking and complex story gripped you as much as it did us, leaving you contemplating the intricate web of human emotions and the devastating power of secrets, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Crime Files 247 for more in-depth explorations of the darkest corners of the human experience. We want to hear from you. What do you think about this case? Was William Anderson a man pushed too far, driven to an unthinkable act by an unbearable truth? Or was there another way out, a path to resolution that did not involve such tragic violence? Could anyone truly survive such a profound betrayal without breaking, without being consumed by the very darkness that was unleashed? Share your thoughts, your insights, and your questions in the comments below. Your perspectives are invaluable as we continue to delve into the chilling realities of true crime. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next story.